How should developers approach deployment? Hello, welcome to Hello World Show. I'm Heather Downing.
I'm Spencer Schneidenbach.
And we're here with Damian Brady, who is the DevOps star of NDC. Thank you and welcome to the show.
Thanks. It's good to be here.
So how long have you been coding for? Like, how long have you been doing this?
I've been coding professionally for a little over 15 years now, I think. So finished university, went straight into government, and then had to unlearn all of the government stuff. But about 15 years as a developer, I think. Yeah.
Nice. So what made you get interested in DevOps?
I think it was because I was working in consulting and started going in and helping teams with their process. And just, the things that worked, the things that didn't work. And then DevOps became this kind of buzzword. I'm like, that's what I've been telling people. Like, I've been telling people to do this stuff, and now I know what the buzzword is. And so I started speaking about it, and it's led me eventually to Microsoft to basically do that for a living, which is cool.
Oh yeah, congratulations,
by
the way. That's a big deal. So what do you do for them now?
I am a cloud developer evangelist, or cloud DevOps evangelist, kind of.
So evangelize, it sounds very religious.
Oh, sorry, not evangelist, a cloud DevOps advocate. Wow.
Is that what we changed the name? Is it now it's advocate?
It's advocate, and the reason is it's bidirectional. I should not get the title of my job wrong in the anyway.
It's okay, I'm sure they'll forgive it.
It's a bidirectional relationship. So it's not me telling everybody how awesome Microsoft is at stuff. It's me helping people succeed with Microsoft stuff. And if that involves going back to engineering and saying, this stuff doesn't work exactly the way that you want it to, or people are having trouble with this, then I can feed that information back to Microsoft, which is very cool. Like it's a new Microsoft, right? It's not your daddy's Microsoft. Like 5 years ago, it was a bit more of a lock-in organization, I think. Like if you're using Microsoft for one thing, you use it for everything. And now they're genuinely competing on merit and trying to help people succeed, which is really cool. That's kind of why I joined.
All right, Damian, what are you going to teach us today?
I thought I'd talk about what DevOps actually is. So it's one of these buzzwords that's kind of come up, at least in recent years, at least in the kind of .NET sphere as well. But it's still a little bit unclear what it actually is, how to implement it properly, what it means for an average developer, I think. So I thought I'd talk about that.
Please do.
All right, so the definition for DevOps that Microsoft has put forward, which is my new boss, Donovan Brown, he's defined it for Microsoft, and it was I'm going to stumble on like the first word. It's the combination of people, process, and tools to enable continuous delivery of value to end users. So there's a few things there. There's like people, process, and tools. So you can't do DevOps properly without some good tooling. Like people make mistakes pretty regularly, right? So the tooling, running scripts to make sure that stuff gets built properly and gets deployed consistently and things like that is really important, as much as people actually working together. So the idea of developers and operations people actually working together to the same goals is really important as well. And then the other part of that is delivering actual value to your users. So if you're writing code that doesn't solve a problem, or if you're writing code that doesn't solve it properly, that's not delivering value. So the days of kind of, well, here's my board of tasks, I'm going to move something from the left-hand column to the right-hand column, those days are over. You need to make sure that you're actually writing the right things. Yeah. So that's kind of what the definition is, at least in practice. But then there's the question of, well, that's fine, but I write code for a living. What does that actually mean for me? I think, which is more important for junior developers at least. Yeah. So part of it is kind of like just understanding that your code doesn't exist in isolation. So your code needs to be deployed. It's writing requirements. Like it's fulfilling needs. It needs to live on servers. You need to know what's happening when people are using your software. So that whole kind of cycle of everything from requirements gathering through to development, testing, building, releasing, monitoring what happens in production, and then that feedback loop into the requirements and the next work that you want to do is really important. So a lot of the time people think of like, do you mind if I do a job? A lot of the time people think about like the life cycle, and the traditional like waterfall life cycle of that kind of thing that's my ladder.
That's your waterfall?
That's my waterfall. everybody was like, no, you can't do that anymore. And then they said, right, well, now there's requirements, and they come in, and then there's like a scrum process where you iterate a bit, and then stuff comes out the other end. But this is still like a pipeline from one side to the other. What's missing is what happens with the stuff that's in production. How can we use that to guide, what happens over here? Like, it needs to be a loop. So it needs to be a closed loop. The good thing about DevOps is it involves all of this stuff. Like, it needs a developer doing DevOps properly needs some kind of ownership of what ends up in production. So even if they can't see the production environment or something like that, the code that you wrote is being used by real people. You need to know what it's doing. Is it solving problems? So this kind of loop is really, really important for it, I think, from my personal point of view. Yeah. So the diagrams that I've been showing on stage here at NDC are kind of, there's two parts to them, so I'll just get rid of that guy a little bit. That's good enough. So there's the idea of DevOps as like a cycle where you've got your like planning that happens, and then that leads to your dev work and testing, and then that leads to being able to build and deploy. I'm a developer, so I don't know how to write anymore. And then building and deployment gets stuff out to production, and then you also have this monitor and like test, and that should guide what comes into planning. So it's an actual cycle. This kind of bit here is what developers tend to do a lot of the time, but they can influence this monitoring and testing. So that you can write monitoring tools to, you can incorporate monitoring tools so that you can measure what stuff's going wrong, exceptions being handled properly, and being reported back to the people who are doing the planning, and like as well as just exceptions, things like who's using this feature. Did that release we just did that like hammer the CPU suddenly unexpectedly? Without this monitoring and testing, you just don't know what's happening in production.
That's very true. I actually had quite a bit of a problem with that when I was doing voice stuff, is that I'm like, how do I monitor this once it's out there? And sometimes there's different things that we can add into it. But aren't there people that, like, this is all that they do, is that they monitor? Isn't that considered somebody who does DevOps?
Well, yeah, so the kind of role of DevOps is a little bit confusing as well. And I think a lot of organizations haven't really done it very well. There's a tendency for organizations to say, well, DevOps is the new buzzword. I heard about it at this business conference. So now we're doing DevOps. It's on the webpage, so we're a DevOps company.
We have the buzzword.
You have the buzzword. Yeah, I can sell a DevOps to people. Yeah. So that there's two ways that it gets implemented. Either it gets implemented as this is just the way we work now, and your developers and your security people and your operations and your testers and stuff are all literally working together, your cross-functional teams and all that sort of stuff. They're all working together with the same goal. That's DevOps, doing this stuff with everybody in the company, basically, or everybody involved. Even like marketing people, having this kind of stuff feeding into marketing as well. That's one way that it gets implemented, and that's really, really effective. For larger companies, often they will have a DevOps team. DevOps teams can be great or they can be terrible. The great ones are the ones who just drive this kind of behavior. Teach people how to use the tools, teach the developers how to use the tools, teach the infrastructure people how to use tools and things like that, and just drive that knowledge. The bad way is by being a new silo in the middle of developers and operations people. In other words, instead of developers like writing code, throwing it over the wall to the operations people, they throw it over the wall to the DevOps people, and then the DevOps people throw it over the wall to the operations people. In that case, it's not going to work, I think. Yeah.
So I mean, it really requires more. I mean, DevOps is not just like an IT department thing. It's an organizational shift.
No, there's nothing really improved by adding a new silo to a siloed organization, I think. I mean, the developers need to know how their code is deployed. The operations people need to know how the servers that they manage are being used. The security people need to know what the aims of the software are, and the potential risks from the operations side. The marketing people need to know how the software is being used, whether this feature is implemented correctly, all that sort of stuff. Everybody just needs a bit more ownership over the entire product, the entire process. And you can't do that if you're still stuck in your little silos. So a DevOps silo is just against the whole premise, really. Yeah.
Thank you so much for explaining that, actually. It was really interesting the way that I've always thought about DevOps as something like, okay, I hand it over to someone else to throw up on a server somewhere, and it's not my problem anymore. And it's true, but that's kind of like how it was. Like, I don't know, they'll figure it out, and then they'll file a bug and say, oh, actually, there's a problem.
Yep.
So yeah, I think that's right. There wasn't a lot of ownership that they were saying, well, that isn't my job.
Yes.
Which is we need to get away from. So thank you so much for being willing.
Thank you very much.
No problem. Good to be here.
Don't forget to share this video on social media.
And comment below to be entered into our weekly giveaway.
Tell us what questions you have for our guests. See you next time.